probably every week, sometimes a few times a week, folks come into my office and they have a good idea. You have a great idea. They're like, this is a great idea. I want to see this happen. Awesome. You know, maybe optimistically 10% of those ideas really seem to come to fruition, because the reality is that the transition or the evolution, I would say, from a great idea to something actually happening, the difference is hard work and people really following through. And Brittany came into my office several months ago and said, I have this great idea. I was like, that is a great idea. I really like this, which JWU talks. And it's like, awesome, I'm all for it. Let me know how I can support you. I say that all the time. But it's not that often that people do the hard work to see it actually happen, come to fruition. And so, just a shout out to Brittany, because I've been hearing good things about JWU Talks. Involved and certainly have helped and put in hard work as well. I'm feeling bad about your safe space here. Totally. But, you know, so thanks to all of you, but I also particularly want to recognize Brittany for her work. That's really a way to make a difference. So, thanks. And I'm glad I can be a part of this. And when this idea started shaping up and Brittany asked people, she asked me to talk, and she said, you know, here's all the sessions, which one do you want to talk at? I think probably because she figured I was dean of students, I better just leave this open for him for whatever he wants to do. And so I had this sort of freedom to choose. And I chose this one because this is probably the topic that personally is most important to me. And folks won't know this, but actually for a number of years, I've done a number of presentations at national conferences, regional conferences, all-day workshops, weekend workshops, you name it, around this loosely titled issue of diversity and different aspects of it. Actually, my wife went through a master's program that's called Social Justice Education, and we've done a lot of things together as well. So it's been important to both of us in our home for many, many years now. Now that being said, you know, it's the #1 thing that I get back or get a question about when I do something, when I do a workshop or something on diversity. Anybody want to take a venture at what that #1 question would be that I get?
Why are you doing this if you're white?
Yes. Why are you doing it if you're white? Why are you doing it if you're straight? Why are you doing it if you're a guy? Why especially are you doing it if you're a straight white guy? Because the perception would be, it's not really about me. Or, I don't, you know, it's no big deal for someone like me. It's not my burden. But what I want to offer to you is, whether you agree or disagree with me on that, I'm going to let you know I think it's my burden too. I think it's all of our burdens. I suspect that the fact that you're here, you probably more likely than not would agree with that. But sometimes I've really gotten a lot of resistance from a certain group of people, straight white guys, telling me I'm wrong for thinking that I would have something to say on this subject. And I get that, I understand, I'm fine with that, but I think it's a statement. And that's why I want to talk a little bit about privilege tonight, and what role we all play in this world we live in. How many people are familiar with the concept of privilege when it comes to diversity? Okay, good. So we have some folks that have dealt with this already. Let me say too that I appreciate Joey's comments and Kevin's comments. I thought they were right on, and I think it's good. All these different voices. There's one thing I'm not going to disagree. I'm going to go a different direction than Joey would. People will come to my office too and they'll say, oh, I really think we should do this. And I'm like, thank you. I think that's a really good thought. I appreciate you sharing that. But we're going to go a different direction. I'm going to go a little different direction than Joey right now. In that, I'm going to say, hey, if I offend you, I'm okay with that. Okay. If this subject was easy to talk about, and if it was easy to solve, we would have done it already. We're talking about some tough stuff here, and we need to keep talking. We need to keep dialoguing. So even though I'm sort of talking at folks right now, I would encourage you to keep the conversation up after this time that we've had here together. And as a matter of fact, that's what I enjoy the most is when I've done workshops or talks with diversity, and people are like, oh, you know, there was all this angst, or people were really talking, and everybody went to lunch, and man, that's all people were talking about at lunchtime was this subject, and people were disagreeing, and man, they're working through it good, because just because people are agreeing doesn't mean it's a good thing. That being said, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about diversity, and they'll say a lot of things. I want to talk, some of these words may be familiar with folks, but oftentimes you'll hear the word, well, let's start with stereotypes. Kevin, you talk some about stereotypes. I'm going to offer a suggestion here. Stereotype is a belief about a certain group of people based on who they are, in which we define those people all in the same way. So, Kevin, since you were bold enough to come up here and talk, can I say, look, isn't he a sharp dresser? Yeah, I am. Because do we ever hear that gay folks are a sharp dresser? No. Stereotype, right? Not saying it's good or bad, but we're taking and we're saying gay folks are sharp dressers. Is every gay person a sharp dresser? No. My friend Henry, I'm going to talk about him a few different times through the course of these next few minutes. My friend Henry is first generation American of Chinese descent. He actually grew up outside Sacramento working for his parents' restaurant, and they didn't really speak much English. He lived in the Chinese community. Henry's not good at math. Right? He's Asian. You know what he says? I'm a disgrace to my race. Because Asians are oftentimes described as the model minority. You ever heard that? So that's a stereotype. And I've heard people argue, that's not a bad stereotype, that's a good stereotype. Well, whether it's good or bad, it's a stereotype. Here's another word, prejudice. That's taking and assigning a designation to a group of people that's negative. So a stereotype is assigning a designation to a group of people, whether it's good or bad, it's assigning that designation. Prejudice is taking and assigning a negative designation to a group of people. What's an example of that? Can somebody offer something that's an example of a prejudicial statement, prejudicial view?
Here's one before. If anything, they said you're Hispanic, so you must know how to know laws. Happens.
When I first, I'm from Texas, so I should have a green card because I'm Hispanic as well. Because I'm from Texas.
Oh, if you're from Texas, you should hold them. And if whatever refinery you're not there.
And like,
Who's lazy?
Oh,
No. Prejudicial statements. A certain group is assigned as lazy. Who is it? African Americans. That's a prejudicial statement. Let's take that a step further. I used a couple examples here specifically to make a point. When I said, none of these students, who's going to stop me? Because I have a certain level of power through my position. Okay, I can affect things that affect others. Actually, I'm the one who said, we saw this from 5 years ago. It looked really crappy. It's like, we need to spend some money in this room. It's an important programming room. Now look at it. Doesn't it look awesome? Yeah. I made sure that happened. I have power. When it comes to hiring and firing, I got power. So, what's oppression? Silencing of the group. Good. Did somebody say something over here?
A certain group is not allowed privileges.
When certain groups are not allowed privileges. For purposes of this conversation, I think those are true. This is what I'm going to offer. When you take prejudice and you add power, you have oppression. take, anybody know 5 Points here? Kind of a bad neighborhood in Denver. Most folks live in 5 Points. A lot of times they're living there because they can't live outside of 5 Points. They're probably an hourly employee, not making a ton of money. Education levels, the lowest of the different neighborhoods in Denver. A person in 5 Points could have their own prejudices. We all have some prejudices. But they may not have the power that's going to affect others with it. The danger is when you have people, not that that's not dangerous, the greater danger is when you have people who have power and have prejudices to go along with that power. And that's where we see some real damage. I will say I've seen some real damage. If I think African Americans are lazy and I do a lot of hiring and firing, is that going to have an impact? Scary, isn't it? Think about those who are in power. If I think, great, you're Hispanic, you'll work hard, let's hire you. I think I'm totally fine with gays, as long as they just don't get too flamboyant. Is that going to affect the workplace? Is that going to create some havoc? Yeah. So there's different levels here, right? Here's something else for you to think about. A lot of people will say this: I'm not prejudiced. I've never done anything to those peoples. You heard that? We oftentimes view our role in diversity in terms of personal or individual acts, right? Because I haven't done anything I've never hit a woman. I value women. Because I have gay friends and I've never criticized them. No, I've hired gay people. I must be pretty gay friendly. But just because there's this individual level where I may even be supportive, I'm still participating in systems, we all are, that show favor to certain groups. Let me give you a personal example. We moved twice for my job. So we were living in Connecticut, and my wife politely said, hey, I think it's my turn. She was getting a good career opportunity, and I was in a doctoral program with them. I said, let me just get through my coursework, and then, okay, it's your turn, let's move. So we moved to Colorado, 2004. We were kind of fine about that for a few different reasons. One, I could go on her company's insurance. That's a biggie. Because if we weren't married, if we weren't allowed to marry, that would have been a much tougher decision, because that would have been me moving here without any health insurance. And let me tell you, as you get older, that health insurance is more and more important. So, it's a great privilege. I could go on my wife's health insurance. So we moved to Colorado. We started looking around for houses. I wasn't really interested in living in 5 Points, so I didn't really think about that neighborhood. We found Stapleton. You know, it didn't really cross our minds to worry that because we were white, people might not be that friendly about us moving into Stapleton, right? Never really thought about a neighborhood I wanted to move into. Gee, being white might really scare some people in that neighborhood. Now, maybe it wouldn't, but I had the privilege of not having to worry about it, not having to think about it. My friend Martin Reed, just several years ago, I was living in California at the time. We were traveling up north, and we had stopped to get gas, and we were hungry, and we went to get out of the car because we were going to eat at this restaurant And then Mark's white, African American. And he said, nah, I'm not feeling safe here. Gee, we're off, the freeways in California to 5. Like, we're in a small town off the 5. And I thought, geez, we might not like white people to come into that restaurant. Because that is a privilege. I didn't have to worry about someone judging me for that reason. Several years ago, I was attending a workshop about women's issues. Okay? There was a good 60, 70 people in this workshop. And the speaker, who happened to be a male, he's talking and he asked the group, he goes, let's go with guys first. He goes, how many guys in this room, let's say once every week or two, you find yourself in a situation where you're worried about your physical well-being? Like you realize you could be a victim of an attack, or you just don't feel safe where you're at. No guys raise your hands. Like, how many of you, once every week, or none of us raised our hands? I said, how many guys maybe once every month or two, you feel like your physical safety may be compromised? You may feel threatened in some way, or just know it's not a safe place for you to be alone. A couple guys raised their hand. I said, how many of you can't remember the last time you felt that way, or you would say, if it happens once or twice a year, maybe at most, but pretty much you're coming and going from things, from the mall or whatever, and you're not really worried about your physical safety. We all raised our hands. I said, all right, let's address the women in the room. I said, how many women in the room, maybe once every week or two, you might question whether or not it's a safe environment for you, or if you're in a safe place, or it might alter your decision making, and you might decide not to do something because of that. Almost every woman in the room raised their hand. It's like, wow, I'm a guy. Look at this privilege I have. I'm free to roam. So you start looking at these things, and you say, well, everybody has some challenges, right? And everybody has some privileges. And we call this the intersection of identities. Okay? Aspects of who we are, not what we choose. So I'm giving you a lot of pluses in my category, a lot of privileges. So we'll just go with pluses and minus. Pluses. Yeah, I'm a guy. I can kind of cruise around. Now, this is not always true for everything and everybody in every situation, but I'm thinking about my physical well-being a lot less on average than women do. Check in the plus category. I can kind of roam free. Moved into Stapleton, never worried about if my race would lead people to think negatively, never worried that neighbors might give me a second look because there's the white guy in the neighborhood. So kind of could choose, so I'm going to put a plus in the privileges column there. And we can go on. I can move to Colorado, not worry about medical insurance. Another plus. Now, there are some challenges. When I was growing up, I never heard of ADD or ADHD. Was something that you started hearing about in the 90s. And I was in my 30s in the 90s. And a lot of people I knew started saying, hey, have you heard of this thing? That totally describes you. So I had to learn some about it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's me. Totally me. I mean, I've always struggled, still struggle now. Go in a restaurant, we're sitting down, like, I'm gonna probably choose a seat that I'm not gonna look at the TV, because I'm probably not gonna be able to listen to the person who's across from me. My wife will tell you that's a good idea. I'm always having to make choices. I have to, this is budget time, really make deals with myself to concentrate. And there's challenges I face around that. And that's kind of a silent one. But that's, I put that in the minus column. But you tally these things all up, and I have a lot of privileges. And you know what? That's advantages I have. that's why it's important to me to participate in discussions around diversity, because I do have these advantages. In the reality is I still participate in these systems that affect and limit others. So I've taken it on as I'm going to do my part to help try and change and step out and help address this issue. Now, I'm not gonna be able to change the world, but I can work my hardest to change the world around me, and that's my responsibility. And we'll do these workshops. We don't do much anymore. We've done a lot, but in recent years, we've sort of seen others come up and like, that's good, let that happen. But oftentimes with these workshops, especially when you're an all-day one and you're really hashing through some stuff, and folks will start saying, I feel so guilty. You start realizing, just because I'm not participating in individual acts of racism, individual acts of sexism, individual acts in terms of socioeconomic status or religious oppression, you start realizing, I'm participating in systems, and people start feeling guilty. We have a saying, the past, not our fault. The future, our responsibility. Once you're given information and you know, there's a certain level of responsibility I would encourage us to take on. Simple ways. And let me give you an example, one thing that I've done personally here, and I will always be doing it, and it's always going to be an uphill climb. Speaking of advantages, privileges, when I went to school, I never had to worry about having class on Christmas Day. That was always a holiday for me. Is that true for you folks? If you're Jewish, you folks don't have to ask themselves if you are or not. If you're Jewish, pretty likely that you're going to have class in Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. And so, what happens? Well, I'm always, every year, every August, we're like talking to faculty, what you remember, and the faculty's response is, you know what, if I offer a test on that day, then, you know, they won't be in trouble. They can set up a different time to come to my office and take that test. Well, that's nice. Let's take it a step further. Because I think every student here has a right to feel just as normal as every other student here. And so if a student's like, oh, okay, so I can go to the professor's office and I can take that test on a different day, are you feeling normal? That's why I encourage faculty, try not to have tests on Rosh Hashanah. You know, take it as, some faculty say, take it as an opportunity to talk about Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. Because we're participating in a system that is sort of biased around holidays. It's what holidays. And you know, I love this because it was like, well, we'll put out a Hanukkah candle. Hanukkah is not a major Jewish holiday. It's actually not near as major as Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. So it's like, how would I feel if I was Jewish? And I see people thinking, oh, let's recognize Hanukkah. But they had a test on Rosh Hashanah. So it's a learning experience. I'm always working with faculty on that. And what I would say is it's an opportunity for all of us to look and consider others who are different than us. And for us to all help everyone feel as normal as possible, including the kid like me who may be ADD or ADHD. I never tested for it. I decided I was old enough, I kind of figured things out, but it was a struggle, let me tell you. Help everybody feel like they can have just as normal of an experience as anyone else here on campus. And that is a good way to help take responsibility. Learn, speak up, challenge yourself to learn some more, because I really been trying hard to lead this year because I want to use it.
Do whatever you want.
I want to do it for different reasons. I think it's good as a safe space. I like the example. I'm going to give a different context for it. What happens is, folks, when they're advantaged, when they have privileges, they can kind of roam free. What we do when we offer stereotypes, even though that one sounds a little bit more innocent, when we get prejudicial comments, what are we doing? We're pushing folks and we're limiting their movement. Right? Literally, when I tell you about my friend Martin, I'm like, let's see, going into that restaurant. Remember I told you about my friend Henry? He's a professional colleague and a friend. We were at a conference in Cincinnati, and we went into a restaurant with a few of his colleagues who were part of its the Asian Pacific and Islanders group that's a part of this organization. So there was me and 5 Asian folks going to this restaurant in Cincinnati. It was funny not to watch the waitress help everybody around and not give any service to that table, to our table. Because clearly, it would appear she didn't really like Asian folks. Now, was it coincidence? Maybe, but I can tell you it was a group of us white folks at that table. We wouldn't have been thinking, maybe she doesn't like white people. So I had this advantage that I don't ever have to second guess that. So we box people in based on our views, based on even our stereotypes, on our prejudices. And we do this even though we don't want to. Gosh, it's like 20 years ago now. I had an admin secretary, and Lawrence was his name. I like Lawrence, good guy. One day I'm standing at the copy machine and I'm making a bunch of copies and I'm thinking, I have an admin. Why am I standing at the copy machine making all these copies? I could have given it to my admin. And then I started thinking about that and I thought, I'm not giving it to Lawrence because he's a guy. And I didn't want to bother him. As much as I thought I was a good ally, advocate for others, I was treating him with preference and not asking him to do things. It caused some soul searching for me because I realized I was thinking some tasks were too menial for him, and so I was doing them myself. But if Lawrence had been a woman, I would have given him the copies to me. So I can give you examples. Just the other day, one of the staff in student affairs said, you know, you say guys a lot. You're right, I do. Why will that happen? You know, when I'm referring to a mixed group. It's a good point. This is why I don't use the word freshman, because I'm pretty sure we have women who are first-year students too. And people say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just become a term that's harmless. Maybe. But I still think it matters. Personally, I think it matters. You know, this is an interesting one for me. People will say, who's going to man the tables? Well, I guess no women. So, you know, I'll say staff the tables. Here's a good one of ways that we know about. I'm sorry, let me tell you a story. I was getting on an airplane one day, and what's that room in the front of the plane? What is it? Cockpit. What's the history of that name? All male profession for many years. It's a little room, kind of a pit. Gee, you think that's an affirmative statement? And I think it's humorous. My mom, now 86, I'd never heard her swore once in her life, and she would regularly refer to the cockpit. I tend to call it like that. But you know what? I think it's good to take an affirmative response to change language and to help overcome stereotypes. This is going to change the subject a little bit, but I think it's important to bring it up. And I want to bring it up, and then I'm going to finish. oftentimes you hear affirmative action, and you hear affirmative action being criticized. A lot of times college admissions, you hear affirmative action being criticized. Anybody heard that in the news? Oh, it's unfair. You know, they'll pull out some straight white person who says they didn't get in even though they had better scores. Let me tell you a little bit about affirmative action. First off, I believe in affirmative action. Secondly, affirmative action has never said we're going to let somebody who's dumber get into a school than somebody who's smarter. What affirmative action always works to do is to really level the playing field. Look to make sure that a person gets in because they are smart enough to get in. You know, if you know how many people from 5 points get into Harvard or Yale or Ivy League schools? I'm guessing not many. Very, very small percentage. But does that mean that everybody who lives in 5 points is stupid and just not smart enough to get into Ivy League school? Or does it mean they don't have the opportunities? Maybe their parents didn't pay for the extra classes after school, the interview preparation, to hire them a private coach to learn how to prepare an interview for those Ivy League schools. But you know what's the biggest joke about that? Who knows what a legacy admit is? Few people have heard of it. All Ivy League schools currently allow or have legacy admits. A legacy admit is someone who is a son or a daughter of an alum. And guess what they get? They get to go to dad's school. You know who's a legacy admit? This is not a judgment, I'm just saying it as an example. George W. Bush. Did he get into Yale with his qualifications? Maybe he could have. He didn't have to bother. His dad went to Yale. So when we talk about affirmative action, does it seem like we have some work to do still? I'd rather err on the side of trying to do that work. And if once in a while something goes wrong, and someone who's smarter than someone who got in doesn't get in, I'll live with that, because we live in an imperfect world and we want to keep trying to make sure that folks are going to get in because they deserve to get in, not because of where they were born or whose family they were born into. And what I would encourage you folks to think about is, one, look, I said I've done a lot of workshops, I have a lot of schooling, I have spent 52 years trying to learn more and be better at this stuff. And if there's one thing I've learned is there's no experts in diversity. I still probably have more to learn than I have learned. And one thing that scares me is students come to college now and they'll say, oh, I got that stuff in high school. Well, I want you to know I'm 52, all that stuff, and I'm not an expert in diversity. I have a lot to learn. And I'm so thankful for the opportunities I've taken to learn. When I grew up, people weren't out. I mean, I only learned much later that I had gay friends, because you didn't have that. There was no role models. Even to this day, gay folks, there's not a ton of role models out there. We have these neighbors we're good friends with, Mark and Kim. They've been a couple times to sit to them, hey, would you mind having some students over? We had JWU over a few years ago, and they're like, why? You know, we don't really have anything to offer. I'm like, oh yeah, you do. You're so normal. It's a healthy gay couple who love each other and have a great house and good careers, and they're normal. And you know, we brought folks from JWU over to their house, and kept hearing, this was so great to see. Probably one of my favorite comments. And yet, top two, he said, I've never seen a normal adult gay couple. Think about the advantage we have. Growing up, I had lots of normal, straight couples that I could look at and admire. So, we have a lot to learn, all of us. And what I encourage you to do is remember that and keep striving to learn, and realize that because maybe this isn't your burden, whatever identity we're talking about, it doesn't mean you don't have an opportunity, because oppression isn't just about individual acts, it's about the society we participate in. It's about things larger than us that we can affect. And college grads, as you will all hopefully one day be, you're going to go into the world and